Welcome to another episode of the UXR Minds podcast, where post-it notes are our currency and where surviving stakeholder meetings is an important life skill. Yes, I'm your host, Dale Husband. Now, this isn't your typical interview episode that maybe you're more familiar with here on the UXR Minds podcast. Think of this as your UXR Minds Wrapped episode, minus a questionable music taste and with 100% more research insights. Yes, I don't think you would want to listen to my music taste and Wrapped for 2024. It's kind of depressing. Anyway, I'm your host, Dale Husband again, and we're about to dive into something really exciting today. Now, you know, as UX researchers, we're always talking about synthesis, analysis, research methods, all that data, finding patterns. Well, that's exactly what we're going to do today with our own content. I've noticed some incredible through lines in our recent conversations, and I just had to share these with you. We've had many amazing guests on over the past year, and it was really hard just to find 3 episodes to cover on this wrapped episode, but these are 3 episodes that I enjoyed recording all of them, but these are probably my 3 favorite ones, and probably the ones where I managed to find the most nuggets of things to share with you listeners. So the ones we're going to cover today are my episode with Amanda, my episode with Darren Hood, and also my final interview that I'm going to share with you today with Lawton, Pybus, and Thomas Stokes. So the first episode that I would like to cover is someone that I've actually had on twice recently. I haven't released her workshop yet, but that is being recorded as we speak and edited, so that'll be out with you guys very soon. But she did record a guest interview. I think it was back in the summer now. Amanda Jensen. Now she's just awesome. She's a mentor. She's very big on mentoring and the community and helping people make that next career step. Now she shared her experience in entering the field of UX, user experience, and kind of how her path grew, developed, and changed to where she is now. Now she worked on many volunteer projects around the world in varying fields, not necessarily user experience, but she spoke about how all of those experience and skills that she learned in those roles helped her be a better designer, be a better leader eventually in the role that she is now. So I want to just share with you a clip where she explains how those skills helped her and how you guys, you listeners, can also implement the skills that you have from previous careers in your life.
There's a cultural, like a sociocultural shift around, when people are happy and passionate about what they're doing, they're going to be really great at it. Yeah. And so I think that, this fanning of the flame again of, seeking out what it is you might be good at, or you're curious, or you kind of lead by, what you're passionate about. That's always the best results. And I'll say this because I think sometimes, the market is really difficult right now, but I think that there's something to be said about just acknowledging and letting yourself feel, really listen to yourself and your body, and just that awareness of, yes, it's really hard, and it's okay to feel discouraged, and it's okay to feel like hopeless even, but acknowledge that, feel it, and then find, whatever that action plan might be that works for you. If you need to step out for a second, binge some reality TV, and then come back in and rework your portfolio. I think there's something really special about in coming in and out. And I've done this my whole, I would say, creative career, strategic, just anytime I'm working, is I can be really embedded in a thing. And then you start to hit a wall, whether it's a job market search, whether it's a really complex project or synthesis, or, an immense, very scalable design, whatever, it's being able to go, what? I just need to step away for a second, and just recalibrate, go on a walk, like play with your dog, like do, or find a dog, like,
Don't
like
steal someone
whatever you
else's
can tell
dog.
I'm a dog mom. I like to joke I'm the Christian of the dog world,
Ah,
but like, yeah, I think that ability to like get back in your body and just
mhm,
allow yourself to, okay, like I just need to like, everything's telling me to like, oh, like back up. And then once you get in that high level space and you're not directly in that zone of thought,
mhm.
oftentimes that is when inspiration like goes off.
Yeah.
Like for me, I've always found like when you just step away just a touch and then you come back into it, you realize like, oh my gosh, a new lens, or oh, I
Yeah.
cracked the code, or I figured out this, or blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah. I saw this thing and I never thought about it in this context because I wasn't, so it's like
Yeah.
this really cool kind of beautiful mind, like the numbers all moving around type of moment.
So thank you again to Amanda for coming on and sharing those experiences and also that advice. Now, another super duper guest that I had on was the one and only Darren Hood. Now, Darren's been someone that I followed for a long time, since I've been in the UX field, really. And I'm sure most of your listeners as well are very well aware of him. He's been in the field since the birth, let's say, of user experience, or at least what we now call user experience. Obviously, that term has changed over the years, as we discussed in that episode with Darren. Now, we spoke about let's say, the misinformation that there is out there in the UX field, and how sometimes it can be hard to understand what to listen to, what to take seriously, what to disregard. And that can be especially difficult when you're new in the field or when you're relatively inexperienced, because if you've not got the experience to decipher what's truth and what's maybe someone massaging their own ego, let's say, it can be hard. And I experienced that. I felt like I was being pulled from pillar to post, of who to listen to, what to read, etc. So we discussed that. And I want to share a few highlights from that episode and things I feel would be useful to remember and to take away, and to, if you're transitioning career, entering the UXR field or just UX field in general, things that I feel are good to remember in your early years or early days in your journey into UX. So enjoy these highlights. And again, thank you, Darren. This is valuable. How do you do that?
Oh man, you just mentioned some fantastic things there. It's almost, when I think about, okay, how does a person get started? And I'm going to be extremely rudimentary in my response to that, because you get started before you get started. And what I mean by that is there's something that I've produced. I think you've probably seen it. It's called the UX cycle of excellence.
Yes.
And it really is I call it a framework. I called it a framework one day, and somebody was so grounded in the word framework that they never heard what I said, and I had to like disconnect from that person. You learn to listen, listening skills. The first thing that a person has to do, and I advise a person to, because this doesn't take a lot to do what I'm about to mention. These first two things, the UX cycle of excellence is a 7-step process, but it's the first two steps that I'm going to mention. This is how you get started. Number one, you need to properly define.
Okay.
And from a person entering, that would be properly understand. Try to understand what UX is. Get a base. Understand what it is, because you also need to start developing a filter. If you don't develop a filter, you'll be exactly as the story you just presented a few moments ago. You'll be 5 years in, and it's easier to learn something correct from the beginning than to uproot something 5 years later, because you become if you don't, you become grounded in anchoring bias, and you will have made so many mistakes. You will have entered the discipline and done so much damage to the discipline, and now you become a problem. You want to be an asset. So in order to be an asset, you need to learn what UX is. I'm going to define it for you. I'm going to help you now, and you can decide whether or not you're going to accept it. UX is a moniker. Number one, UX is not a thing. It's not, I'm going to go and UX this thing. Oh, really? How much experience do you have? How you going to plan on doing that? UX is a moniker. In other words, it's a term that's used to describe a broader entity. UX is actually, I have an illustration. I think you've seen this as well. I call it the landscape of UX. It's an illustration with UX in the middle, and it has the four pillars
Yes.
and then all these other elements. Somebody actually counted that. I never counted them. Somebody counted it. They said there's 250 items in this illustration.
Oh, wow.
250. So when you say UX, and I say UX as a moniker, it's something that's used to describe these 250 things. Now, as you get started in your career, you're going to begin learning what these 250 things are. You're going to begin putting them in your toolbox. But you need to understand, first and foremost, what UX is. It's a moniker. When I say UX, it's a moniker. So think UX/UI, 250/1. Does that make sense? No, it does not. So it's a moniker. Number two, and not number two, and this is number two, that's part of number one. It's a moniker. Now, UX is doing UX work involves trying to decide and determine which of those 250 things, or whatever your number is. Maybe you only know 25 or 30 to start. That's fine. But which of these things can I use? Which of these methods, methodologies, techniques, and deliverables can I use to arrive at the sweet spot between business needs, user needs, and constraints? That's what UX is. It's research, it's design, it's strategy, all rolled up into one. And then putting these things to work to achieve the goal for your business and for your users, because you also are the advocate for the people who use your product or solution. So that's it. So what is you define it. So that define it. Now, and there's a little bit of overlap. The second step is that you need to learn the fundamentals, something that a lot of people coming into UX don't learn.
Yes.
So what are the fundamentals? Back to that illustration. Feel free, anybody listening to this, feel free, if you never, just go to images.google.com and search for Darren Hood landscape of UX. You'll find it. It's going to come up.
I can link it in when I post this podcast.
Excellent. You learn the fundamentals, and the four pillars of UX are heuristics and usability, information architecture, UX research, and interaction and interface design. So it would be interaction and GUI. We used to call it GUI. These folks call it UI. It always used to be called graphical user interface. They shortened it, took off the graphical, they took off the G, and they call it UI, but technically it's GUI, it's GUI. So, but you can't do a GUI if you don't know interaction design principles. So I grouped the two together into it, because a lot of people doing GUI interface, they don't know Bruce Tognazini's interaction design principles. They don't know Ben Schneiderman's interaction design principles. So they just decide something. They do. You mentioned guessing. They guess. Experts don't guess. Experts determine. So, and if you are in UX, you're supposed to be an expert, or working your way toward being an expert
with experts.
So this is how you get started. Now the question is, will you go to please don't do a boot camp. I don't boot camps because they're very unethical and they're very predatory. But there are different ways you can go the self-taught route. There's enough good books to achieve that. Some companies, they don't want you if you don't have a degree. If you're forced to get a degree, or you're inclined to do a degree, it works for you to do a degree, then you're going to have to look at what that degree, what they're promoting as part of that program, because some degree programs are not ethical either. And no,
that's true.
And it's about making money. It's not about, they don't have a commitment to the discipline. So it's hard to find a degree that's dedicated to the discipline. So, and that'd be my foundation for getting started.
So I hope you enjoyed all of those highlights from that episode as much as I did, as much as I enjoyed recording them. And again, thank you to Darren for coming on and sharing that advice. Now, finally, we've not got time for many more, as I said at the beginning, but for the final episode that I would like to cover would be my episode, or my recording, with Lawton Pybus and Thomas Stokes. It was actually my first, I called it a duet, I think, back at the time. My first double guest interview with the founders, or the co-founders, of Jobit Labs. Jobit Labs being a consultancy firm in research, in UX research. So I highly recommend, if you are an organization that is looking to level up their UX research practices, and even just have some support in setting up a research team or strategy, etc., reach out to them, joebitlabs.com. And they also, again, thank you also to them for sponsoring a few of the episodes back in September. So yeah, we discussed their journeys, relative journeys into user experience and research, and how they both met back during their studies, and how that has grown into where they are today into consultancy. And we discussed that, the difference between maybe in-house research or setting up consultancies or an agency. So we discussed the pros and cons to that if you're early in your career and you're looking or you're thinking about which route to take. But we also looked about when you are looking for a role in UX research, how to navigate that journey of unemployment and searching for the right role, and kind of managing your mental health, your thought processes behind maybe why applications are not considered or rejected, or why you don't progress in an interview process. So there's a lot of nice nuggets also for me personally that I'm in that situation at the moment. So I want to share a few snippets from that episode as well that I feel are beneficial for us all, especially in the current climate, where many people are struggling with layoffs and looking for roles within UX and UXR. So enjoy these snippets, and again, thank you to Lawton and Thomas for their time in recording that episode.
When job seeking, so this is specifically talking to any of the listeners who are looking for a position, one of the things obviously we've seen in our research and you hear from others in discussions is one of the main pain points when interviewing for positions is a real lack of feedback after getting a round of interview, for example.
Yeah.
You might hear, yes, you're advanced to the next stage. Yes, you got the job, or no, you're not getting the job, right?
Yeah.
But often that
usually copy and paste templates.
Exactly. You don't get specified feedback directed towards you from the hiring manager or recruiter. Yeah. And a lot of people experience this, and I agree, it would be really nice if we actually had that type of feedback, but for various reasons, you don't get that. I've seen some folks fill that absence and try to rationalize why they got one result or another. And my big advice is actually don't do that. And here's why. I'm not trying to be like, oh, you shouldn't think about that. Yeah, after you get a rejection, you're going to think about all the reasons why that's possibly true.
Yeah,
that happens. And you're going to be really happy if you get the job, right? But the reason why I say try not to extrapolate and come up with your reasons is that you have no idea why that final decision got reached. It could be that there was an internal candidate for that job who basically had it all wrapped up and they had to go through a formalized process. It could be nothing about you as the individual. It could just be something else. So inferring what that hiring manager, what that recruiter's thinking often distracts us from what we can do, which is always focusing on our process and on preparation. So looking at those tips about, how do you prepare for interviews? How do you prepare for scenario-based questionings? How do you maximize your chances of conveying your excellent skills via your portfolio and resume? That's where to really spend the time. Let's remember that there's a lot process-wise, input-wise that we do have control over, and let's focus on that. So I hope that's an empowering message for folks to hear that, if we focus on our process, our input, eventually, just probabilistically speaking, the end result will take care of itself and you will win that position.
Yeah.
This is something that no matter what stage of your career you're in, like you've got to remind yourself this. And like, Drobit Labs doesn't have a 100% win rate. So like sometimes clients go a different direction. And Thomas, the way you've said it between us is like, don't project onto a lack of feedback. Don't read into it something that's not there.
Yeah.
What we do instead is exactly that, focusing on, did we put in the right inputs? Are we following the process right? And I don't know, it's always good to remind yourself.
So thank you, Thomas and Lawton, for that advice and for sharing that with our listeners on the UXR Minds podcast. And that's it for the UXR Minds Wrapped episode. I hope you've enjoyed it, just kind of going back over some highlights from a few episodes that I've recorded throughout the year. If you do have any suggestions, or if you do want to have a shout out coming up in 2025, just send me a message on LinkedIn, or you can reply in one of the comments to these episodes on Spotify or even on YouTube. I'd be happy to discuss your suggestions or your even guest offers. Always looking for interesting folk to interview on here. And yeah, again, thank you for the support, everyone, and thank you to Amanda, to Darren, to Thomas, to Lawton, and to all the other guests that have been on this year's UXR Minds podcast.